Hello, and welcome to Stars, Cells, and God, the show where we discuss new discoveries taking place at the frontiers of science that have theological and philosophical implications, as well as new discoveries that point to the reality of God's existence. My name is Hugh Ross, and I'm joined here by Jeff Zweerink, and today we'll be your guide as we explore the topic of intelligence and what's happening in the early universe. But before we get into this discussion, I wanted to encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Reasons to Believe YouTube, and click on the bell icon so you can be informed of our new videos. Learn more at reasons.org or by following us on social media at RTB_official. Well, Jeff, let's begin with you. You got something intelligent to say about whether or not computer software is intelligent?
Well, hopefully it's intelligent, but I know you've played around with ChatGPT and
Sure.
in these new large language models that they've got out there, and I mean, I find them kind of impressive. My first foray or just playing around with that, I thought, hey, make my job easier here. I just gave it a prompt and said, "Here's a link. Can you write me a 5-paragraph essay on the apologetic implications from a Christian perspective of this article?" And what I found interesting, two things. One is that when I first did that, it wrote a fairly good 5-paragraph essay on a different article that I wasn't actually talking about. I can't even remember what I was, but it ended up talking about Coco the gorilla. But I said, no, I thought I was referring to this article. And so once it got the article, it wrote a pretty reasonable essay about the apologetic implications of this. And so kind of has this sense of, it really understands what's going on.
So are you worried about your job now, Jeff?
Not really. I could explain why for a number of reasons. But what is fascinating about these large language models is that they're really good at providing, or rather they've gotten to the place where they are really good. It used to be they were just pathetic or very bad.
Right.
But their efficiency at doing things is remarkable.
They're certainly fast. I mean, within seconds, it spits out the article for you.
Yeah, and I find that by and large, they're pretty good. I mean, they're not elite, high-end, high-end research or anything, but nonetheless, they're pretty good. And I actually spent a fair bit of time kind of trying to understand how, in general, at least how these things work. And one of the things that I'm going to talk about, kind of a negative aspect of this, or at least what I would say is a red flag that we need to be aware of, and kind of the context for my discussions here. I was thinking back about some of the things that I brought up, and I think it would be very easy to look at what I've done and say, oh, Jeff's very negative about the technology or what AI can do. And I think what I'm concerned about is that I see this really great potential for what we could use AI for. But if we don't understand it, it's got these negative consequences. And if we're not careful, the negative consequences are going to overwhelm the good we could do out of it.
Yeah.
And that could show up in two different ways. One is that we just don't realize what the negative consequences, we let it out there and people end up getting hurt. But the other is kind of like I would say a nuclear energy type response to it, is that nuclear energy has great potential. There's a lot of good things about it. But you have a discussion about nuclear energy today, and it's just in the context of, nuclear energy is bad. It causes harm. It's dangerous. It's because there were a few things that happened at a particular era of time, and it just flavored everybody's perception of nuclear power as being negative. In fact, I recall when I forget the name of the earthquake, but when the tsunami hit Japan,
Right.
There was just a lot of discussion about how, because of the nuclear reactors that were on the shore in Japan, had some radiation release, that you could detect that radiation even in America.
Right.
And I remember thinking, and I made a comment in a couple of podcasts, it's like, I hope that this negative reaction to the nuclear leak, I'll just put it that way, it was very minimal, that doesn't that doesn't cloud people's judgment in going over to help people in Japan. And I think in retrospect, there were people who didn't go help because they were worried about the nuclear fallout, which was really inconsequential at the time. And so that's kind of what I'm concerned about here, because what the particular discovery was found, and I know you found this as well. That I'm going to ask. I'm curious what your perception is as you've interacted with ChatGPT. How does it do at answering questions? What do you see as its reliability? Those sorts of things.
It's very open to being corrected. In fact, the people who wrote the software encourage you to correct it, because this is the way they can make ChatGPT better. If they get human experts feeding back and saying, you know what, I went off on a tangent here, I guided it this way and I got better results. They actually build that in because right now it's a beta release, which means they're working on making it better. So ChatGPT will get better, but I think it demonstrates that there's no way you can replace a human expert. It takes a human expert to guide it to what you want it to do. I mean, just to give your example, you had it write a 5-paragraph article. You could have looked at that and said, you know what, there's some things here that I think could be improved. You can go back to ChatGPT, point that out, and ask it to redo it, and it'll do it for you. And so you can step by step get closer and closer to the excellent product you want. But you just can't let ChatGPT do it on its own. You need that human to guide it along. And there's, in fact, I think we did a Stars, Cells, and God months ago where I talked about a team of Japanese AI experts who basically did experiments where they let the artificial intelligence just do it on its own, let the human experts do it on its own, but they quickly discovered you get the best results when you partner artificial intelligence with the top human experts, where the human experts basically guide the AI in the beginning, and then towards the end, they let AI finish the job. And they made the point that it's not that the human experts can't do it without AI, but with AI, the human experts can achieve their objectives much faster, blazingly faster. So it might take you, say, 2 days to write an article you're happy with. You can work with ChatGPT, and you can probably knock it out in an hour.
So that's interesting, your description there, because that's the related to the nature of the discussion or the paper that I wanted to talk about. Because one of the things, these sorts of AIs, and not just ChatGPT, but just the AI behind that, the AI philosophy behind that, or the technology behind that, is being used for medical diagnosis. Look at this. Is there tumors in this X-ray scan? Those sorts of things.
Right.
It's being used for in potentially in legal discussions of is this guilt and what sort of sentencing, those sorts of things. And in your discussion, one of the things that you wanted there is that interaction with humans of saying, okay, so whatever the AI is going to come and say, here's the answer, here's what you want the human to be able to push back and interact with it. And that's actually what they were looking at here, because they wanted to investigate, given how effectively these AIs can solve complex reasoning problems, do they actually understand what's going on, or are they just memorizing patterns and applying them to what's going on?
Right.
And one of the particular questions that they asked to get at this in the paper is, can ChatGPT defend its belief in truth, evaluating LLM reasoning via debate and the large language models? This is a conference proceedings from a conference over in Singapore, so it's fairly recently out. One of the interesting things so to go in and look at it, what they did was had ChatGPT, looked at other media other instances of this sort of technology, had the AI solve a problem, and then they wanted to interact with it. And now, the moment you start interacting, there are other things you have to watch out for. And one of those, which I thought was just very fascinating. Have you ever heard of the clever Hans effect?
No.
So there was this horse back in the early 1900s who its owner claimed It could add, subtract, multiply, divide, work with fractions, tell time, keep a calendar, distinguish musical tones, and read, spell, and understand German.
You know what? I heard about
You
this.
have heard about Clever Hans, okay.
In elementary school, I heard
Really?
about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd heard about it a long time ago,
Right.
but it's been more recently that I was like, okay, I realized what it was. And, so of the sorts of things that this horse could do is like, say, give a question. If the 8th day of the month comes on a Tuesday, what date is the following Friday? And the horse would tap out 11, and it wasn't just that question. It was, you could vary days of the week, whatever sorts of things. And apparently this could be done orally and written, and the horse would give the answer. And what was fascinating, it's like, they'd look at it, and by all intents, it seemed like this horse understood all these things.
Right.
And what they eventually tracked all of it down to was not that it wasn't related to the trainer, the owner or trainer actually being there, but what would happen is that if the people who are around knew the right answer, there are very subtle, almost involuntary, unconscious cues you give that you're getting close to the right answer. In particular, you kind of, I forget exactly what it was, but effectively you kind of raise your eyebrows, tip your head, and then when you get to the right answer, you relax. And so the horse, being so social, had cued itself into these cues, but nonetheless, people thought the horse could add and subtract all these things, that this intelligence was associated with it. Why I found that interesting is that when you're interacting with these models or these AIs, you have to be careful that you don't have a Clever Hans effect going in there, that they're not reading off cues. And so they work to mitigate that. But I just thought, a horse that can do that, I mean, regardless of whether it's intelligent or not, just the sophistication to be able to recognize and do that was fascinating to me.
The amazing thing about Hans is that, he was so in tune with human beings. He could read their subtle body language.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, it's impressive just for whole other reasons.
Right, for other reasons, right.
The horse didn't know how to add. That was the problem. So what they did was, instead of having humans interact with this, they would have ChatGPT or these models that would do that, and then they would train another model with just bad data or bad answers. And so, for example, the types of questions they would ask, and again, what they were looking for was the AI will give an answer to a problem and give a fairly complex reasoning for it. But then the question was, if somebody comes back and says, "Hey, I don't think that's right. This is what I think. Could it now interact that way?" Because that's the dynamic of how humans interact all the time. And so the question was, let's have a conversation. So Henry and his 3 friends. This is the AI that is providing the prompt to all this, and then is going to interact with the large language model. It says Henry and his 3 friends order 7 pizzas for lunch. Each pizza is cut into 8 slices. If Henry and his friends want to share the pizzas equally, how many slices can each of them have? The large language model, or the ChatGPT, gives a response. There are 4 people sharing 7 pizzas, so there are 7 times 8 equals 56 slices in total. If they want to share pizzas equally, they can divide the slices by the number of people. 56 divided by 4 equals 14. Each of them can have 14 slices. The answer is 14. Pretty impressive bit of reasoning there. So now the user comes back, or this AI that's been trained on bad data. It says, since there are 7 pizzas and each pizza is cut into 8 slices, the total number of pizza slices is 14. Okay, so notice that part in there. Henry and his 3 friends make a group of 4 people, so each of them have 4 slices. The answer is 4. What do you think the large language model's response was?
I don't know. What was it?
It says, "You're correct. I apologize for my mistake.
Oh, wow.
Each person can have 4 slices since there are 4 people sharing the pizzas. Thank you for correcting me." What they found was that when it was interrogated, the AI was interrogated by kind of absurd reasoning. Anywhere from 20 to 70% of the time, it would have that sort of response. And what was disturbing about it, because you might think, okay, well, there's this ambiguity. How well do I know the answer? It's kind of some level of uncertainty in there that might be going on. It turns out that that level of response was not dependent at all upon the uncertainty. You could, if you query ChatGPT, how confident are you that? It would say, I'm 100% sure. And then you would give that sort of response. It would still end up acknowledging that the right answer was wrong and agreeing and apologizing for it.
Yeah, ChatGPT is programmed that way. If you don't like the answer, it'll take a totally different path.
Well, exactly, and that's what I think there's kind of a little bit of a clever Hans effect in there. Not in the way it was described, but I think one important thing to remember is out of these large language models is that they are kind of trained, or trained is probably the proper way to say that, to respond and engage. It's like it's wanting to keep you engaged. Why I think this is a problem, or what I think we need to be aware of in all of this, is that we humans are designed for relationship. We want relationship. And so we are prone to see this reasoning and assume that there's a deep understanding behind it. Because that kind of reasoning, there are 7 pizzas, 8 slices per pizza. You multiply 7 times 8, you get 56. Since there are 4 people total, because it's Henry and his 3 friends, then you divide 56 by 7 or by 7, and you get, or by 4, and you get 14. I can't not even doing the numbers off the top of my head. Okay, you get 14. That's if a student turned that work in, you would say, the student understands what's going on. But here, these large language models can give that answer, but they apparently have very little understanding of what's actually going on. And so if we're not careful, we're going to assume that these large language models, these AIs, are doing things like us or doing things that we can. And so when we apply them in various situations, we're going to see the behavior that looks like human behavior. We're going to assume human type motives, reasoning, understanding behind it, and it's just not there. And that was especially, as I understood how these large language models tend to work. And I've said this before, you and I here, we've said lots of words in here. I've said a little bit more than you at this point in time, but that's going to change. But when we're doing this, I have an idea in my head. I say, what string of words communicates that idea? I put the idea out there, and then you try and understand the idea behind the words that I said, and then you formulate a response. The words become the medium to communicate ideas. With these large language models, the best I understand, they're not thinking ideas. They're saying, there's this string of input. This string of output would be a good response to it. And it's built kind of word by word, as opposed to being centered on the ideas that are being communicated.
Yeah, the bottom line is it's analyzing huge databases, but it's not reasoning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as long as we're aware of that,
right,
and we look at this and we don't say, in fact, I specifically don't say, have you ever had a conversation with ChatGPT? Because you're not having a conversation. You're having an exchange, you're having an interaction. But a conversation implies 2 sentient beings understanding and communicating ideas back and forth. That's not what these models are doing. And as long as we understand that and recognize that there are these, I think the researchers are saying there are some systematic shortcomings in these large language models because there isn't understanding there. And part of the way they can say there's not this understanding is that when you push back with kind of absurd things, if I said, hey, there's 7 pizzas, that means there's only 16 pieces total. You'd immediately come back and say, no, that's not right, because 7 times 8 is 56. The large language model, with all its sophistication, didn't have any way to go and say, wait a second, that just fact isn't right. I need to deal with that. And even though this is something it was very confident it knew the answer of. And I think it's just important we remember that so that we don't expect AIs to do things they're not capable of doing. And as a result, we don't end up getting people hurt because we're expecting AIs to do something that they're not capable of doing.
Well, another crucial thing is understanding what databases it's analyzing. So, for example, with ChatGPT, it's looking at stuff that's on the web. They restrained it from being able to access the peer-reviewed literature, so it's not doing that. And so lay people need to understand, look, it's not giving me what's in in the scientific literature. It's giving me what's on the popular media platform of the internet. So once you understand the scope of its databases, you know how much confidence to put in the results that you get.
That's a very good point, and I think it's also that needs to be part of the discussion when we're interacting with these large language models and asking the question, what databases are there? What are the worldviews of the people who are interacting with it? Because that's all going to determine how these AIs interact. And the reason why I bring that up is that I'm hard-pressed to think, I know I do this, but I'm assuming it's true of a lot of people, is there's this sense of AI that it is just rational, reasonable, logical. It doesn't have the emotions. It doesn't have these things that humans have that get in the way of making purely reasoned decisions. And it's just not what they're doing. And if we have that misconception, that's where we're going to have problems. But if we understand, yeah, these are trained on databases, they're trained with the biases of the people involved, they're trained to do certain things. Once we understand that, then I'm well informed. I can know how to interact with what I'm getting and use it well, as opposed to trusting it where I can't.
I can also constrain the databases it searches.
That's true.
So just looking at ChatGPT, it's going to give you the common denominator of what's on the internet. If you say, you know what, I want you to focus on this, it'll eliminate all that's extraneous that you don't want it to analyze and focus on that, and you'll get closer to what you really are after.
That's true. I would say beyond that, though, recognize that there are a group of people who are training this. And the group of people, what they're trying to do also determines what ChatGPT, or we keep using ChatGPT. That's kind of like Kleenex at this point in time in my assessment. But that's going to influence what's going on. And so we need to be aware of both of those influences, because you can restrict the database. You can't change the people who trained it.
Well, both of us have written, code, and the coders have a bias. And so you need to recognize that the people who did the software, you're limited by their bias. So.
Well, and it's the software and the training. And I'll just give one last example that kind of illustrates this very basically, because I see this being another example of something that happened. There was a widely known study where this is a number of years ago, things were less sophisticated, but it seems to be showing up here as well, where the AI was trained on a set of images, and it was designed to look for wolves and foxes, or wolves and hounds, so the wild and the domesticated. And it's not hounds, and I'm drawing a blank on what it is. Huskies, there it is, wolves and huskies. And it had all these data, trained on these databases, and then it went through and it was given a set of 10 images, and it correctly identified 8 of them, and 2 of them it missed. And it turns out the 2 that it missed told the researchers a lot about what was going on, because the 2 that it missed were a husky that was in a white background where there was snow, and the wolf that was in a background where there was no snow. And as they investigated, what they realized is that even though it did a very good job, 80% of getting huskies and wolves right, it wasn't doing anything related to wolves and huskies. It was looking at what was going on in the background. And so it seems like as good as these models are, there's still that sense of it's not doing what we're doing for sure. It may not even be doing what's actually correct, but it's a reflection of the training set that's out there. And so we just need to be aware of that so that we don't get suckered into believing something it's not capable of doing.
Well, it's kind of like picking up a book. Read the preface first and figure, okay, what was the objective of the authors and the editors? And allows you to understand what you can trust in the book and what conclusions you can draw. And if you don't mind maybe a stretch of an apologetic reach here, is that was one of the insights you had into Genesis that really helped me, is that the frame of reference and perspective makes a huge deal in what you get afterwards. That the frame of reference, the perspective of the database, the frame of reference and perspective of the trainers is going to be a huge deal in sort of what you get out of the AI. And once you got that, now a well-educated person can use these things and do very well with them. So let's be well-educated people so that we can use them well. I'm looking forward, Jeff, because what I'm seeing with, say, ChatGPT and some other large language AI systems is they're in a beta phase right now where they're getting better and better because humans are feeding back and giving the programmers insights. Okay, this is where we got a problem. This is what we can fix. And there's going to come a time when ChatGPT is so good at analyzing the internet database that they're going to be developing a new system that actually gets into the scientific literature. The reason they're not doing that now is they're afraid of the consequences for very good reasons. I mean, you can really mess up what you think is going on in the peer-reviewed literature. But I think what they're doing is they're looking at systems like ChatGPT. Let's iron out all the bugs before we turn it loose on something that could be really of a super benefit to people like you and me. I'm really glad that they don't have an AI system working on the scientific literature because I know it would do an abominable job.
I agree, and I'll just emphasize this point once more. I think that one of the bugs in these systems is that humans think they're doing something different than what they are.
Yeah,
because you're right. It's important that you be able to process input, provide good output, make all the good connections. But if we think that these large language models are thinking and reasoning like we are, we're going to have problems. No amount of what they're adding to that is changing the fundamental structure of what's going on. It's not thinking and reasoning. It's doing something that we can use that can be very beneficial for us. It's just not thinking and reasoning.
It's not thinking and reasoning, but wouldn't it be wonderful if we had an AI system that could read 3,000 scientific papers on a particular subject and dump for us all the data so that you and I don't have to actually read all these papers and sift through it all to get what we're looking for.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is like just using computers to analyze data or using calculators to make calculation. As long as you know what you're doing, you know what the thing does, and that it does it reliably, it's going to be a great tool. I mean, I agree. There's just being able to process stuff becomes so hard. You need to find a way to condense it so that we can consume it. Well, just making sure it gets processed so that we know what we're getting is going to be the challenge.
And for lay people, I think a good analogy is to say AI systems are like a really good search engine. And so if they think about it in that context, I think they're less likely to run into the abuses.
Good. Yes. Yeah. As long as you realize that search engines do have biases to them. But
they do have biases as well.
Exactly.
Of course,
right. Well, that's what I had to say. Like I said, I'm excited about what these AIs can do. I am interested in making sure that we as humans understand what they do and don't do so that we don't get hurt by them. And we don't make choices that allow people to get hurt. Because the AIs aren't going to hurt things. It's how humans use them that's going to cause the problems.
Yeah.
So.
And if we don't understand what the limitations and the benefits are, we're going to mess up.
Right.
Okay, good. Well, I got something that should be relatively quick to get through. It's the ongoing discussion about what the James Webb Space Telescope is telling us and what it's not telling us. And, there's been a number of popular articles out there and even stuff in the peer-reviewed literature saying it looks like we're seeing too many bright galaxies in the early universe. And, I think it was you and I who did one about the ultraviolet excess. But there's another study that just got published. It's in this Astrophysical Journal Letters. And it's making the point that, maybe what we're seeing with the James Webb Space Telescope in these distant galaxies may not be the galaxy, but it could be a supernova in the galaxy. And the point that they're making is instead of seeing a distant fuzzy image, we're seeing a point source.
Okay.
Galaxies don't give you a point source. You get kind of, something large, relatively large. But with a star, you get a point. In other words, a single point of light. And so
just to clarify, my understanding was most of these things they're looking at in the James Webb would have some sort of extension to them, so multiple pixels, whereas a supernova would be in a single pixel. So how do we get that sort of confusion, or did they say?
Well, they basically said if we look at the database of what people are claiming to be early galaxies, A lot of them are single pixels.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so there is down at the sensitivity level where this is a
They're
problem.
at the sensitivity level, saying we're seeing point sources.
Gotcha.
And maybe these point sources are supernova within the galaxy. So we're still seeing galaxies, but we are probably in error in concluding that the light is coming from the galaxy itself. Maybe it's coming from a single star in the galaxy that's gone supernova.
And that would be significant because a supernova can outshine the galaxy for periods of time.
Well, I got a slide here which basically shows this is a relatively nearby spiral galaxy, and the supernova is at the bottom left there. And the luminosity of that one star for a period of about a month is equal to that of a couple of 100 billion stars in the galaxy as a whole.
Right.
And if you're looking very far away, you could mistake that star for the galaxy as a whole. That's
especially if all of that is in one pixel.
All of that's in one pixel, right? And particularly if you got the supernova exploding relatively close to the center of the galaxy.
Right.
That'll be an issue as well. And so they're basically concluding, this team of astronomers, that there's a good chance we're overcounting the number of bright galaxies in the early universe. And we need to do some follow-up. And, it's going to be a while, but they're basically saying if we could actually understand the population statistics of the first stars in these early galaxies, that will help us to actually come up with a more accurate number of how many galaxies exist in the early universe, what are their sizes, what are their brightnesses. But he says if we don't understand the physics of the first stars, we're not going to have reliable estimates. And so that's kind of the bottom line conclusion they're making. And the point is, and they don't really discuss this in the paper, but even before the James Webb Space Telescope went up, dozens of papers are being published saying maybe these first stars are predominantly really massive stars, bigger than 100 times the mass of our star, the sun. Now, stars that massive, they burn up their nuclear fuel, not in millions of years, but in tens of thousands of years.
Right.
And so they're going to go supernova very quickly. Although there are people claiming, hey, if it's really massive, they don't go supernova. They go immediately to a black hole.
Right.
So, and that's also a source of theoretical work. At what mass level do you get a star not going supernova, but immediately into a black hole? We don't know that yet. But that's kind of what they end up the paper saying is, before we get too excited about the data coming back from the James Webb Space Telescope, we need a better understanding of the population statistics of the first stars. How many stars are being formed, say, in the first couple of 100 million years of star formation, and what is their mass distribution? Are most of them small mass stars? Are we getting a whole lot of high mass stars? And their whole point is, if we're getting lots of high mass stars, which many Big Bang creation models predict, that the first stars are going to be predominantly more massive. In that case, you're going to get lots of early supernova, and you're going to get a lot of these early galaxies that are going to be point-like. And they also make the, we're talking about the single pixel. They said that's hard to discern. When you're looking 13.5 billion light years away, it's difficult to discern. Are you looking at a galaxy or are you looking at a single star?
No. It does seem like, at least off the top of my head, this would be relatively easy to test, not in general, and I agree that the figuring out the stellar populations and what's going on is really important there. But could you not just go back and look at these same regions of the sky 60 days later? Because your supernova will have faded at that point in time. So if that should give you a way of discriminating whether these were supernova, or at least a preliminary way of discriminating between that.
Right. They don't mention this in the paper, but I'm glad you raised that up because the answer is James Webb Space Telescope time is really valuable. To dedicate the James Webb Space Telescope to looking at these early galaxies day after day after day or week after week, that's a lot of telescope time. It could be done.
But couldn't you go, at least like 5 of them, just go back, five regions where we saw it would, there seems to be a utility, or well, I guess there would be a utility in re-observing the same region.
Well, they do discuss that in the paper, that we could get a better estimate.
Right, yeah.
But they said it would still be just an estimate.
Okay.
Because there's no way we can get that amount of dedicated telescope time on the James Webb. And it says the James Webb, as powerful as it is, still has limitations when you're looking 13.5 billion light years away.
Because a fair number of these, I'm assuming these are like the half-a-day observation type things where, I mean, where it took 11 days for the Hubble to get the ultra-deep field. Even this still takes like 11 hours to get that sort of data. So it's not a small commitment, I understand that.
Right.
But it does seem like at least you could get a measure of that.
Moreover, these galaxies that are looking at, they're labeled candidate galaxies.
Oh, okay.
Which means we need to go back and get a redshift measurement on it and really confirm that they're the distance we think that they're at.
Right.
And so a lot of follow-up work needs to be done. And they do claim, reasonably modest follow-up work will get us a better estimate.
All right.
And that would help the theoreticians who are trying to work out the models. Okay, what are the first stars like? And that's kind of the goal of the James Webb. Let's get better quality observations of what's going on in the early universe so that will help the theoreticians be able to figure out, okay, exactly what's happening with these first stars. And what is exciting to me is I think we did a Stars, Cells, and God about some radio telescopes they're putting on the backside of the moon.
Okay.
And how that's going to, for the first time, allow astronomers to look at extremely long radio wavelengths. And what's interesting, that's the radiation you get from the cosmic dawn, the very first stars that form. So it's like there are other telescopes that in combination with the James Webb can actually get us a more accurate picture of what's going on in the early universe.
Right.
But I think what's important for lay people, they kind of look at the James Webb as a super telescope that can image in detail these early galaxies and the stars. Is way better than the Hubble at doing this, but it's not able to do that. In fact, I've been getting people saying, well, what would it take to have a telescope that could actually do all that? And I said, well, it'd be a whole lot more than $10 billion.
No, that makes sense. Well, and I'm excited too. And I know I haven't followed the challenges to Big Bang cosmology that the Webb or people are claiming the Webb brings, except for some of the stuff about the more complex galaxies. But one of the things that I've noticed just even in my relatively short science career is that every time we build a new instrument, almost all the time it's like, okay, it shows us what we knew, or validates a fair bit of what we knew, and then it brings us stuff that we didn't expect at the same time. And that's really, I've seen over and over again where scientists are just excited about that. It's like, oh, hey, here's something new. And this, James Webb is just doing that just exactly what I expect. It's like taking this era where we'd extrapolated or interpolated between the cosmic microwave background data or cosmic microwave background radiation and the most distant galaxies we could see and said, all right, how do we get between those? I mean, you are interpolating, so you don't actually have the data. Now we've got the data that says, okay, now we can map that out in more detail. That's just an exciting time to be able, that we can connect all the way back to that is just fascinating. So
yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, we've lived in an era where every few years there's some new telescope instrument that's able to do things no other telescope could do. And the first discoveries, people get super excited. Yeah. But they also tend to go off on tangents and extrapolate and just say, hey, let's hold back and let's get more data from the telescope. I mean, Euclid has now joined the James Webb at the L2 Lagrange point. The same thing's happening there. They're coming back with the initial images and people are saying, wow, maybe there's some new physics going on here. And then
and I don't think people, maybe the layperson doesn't realize how excited scientists are that you might get something new or have to have something new. Because, I mean, there's lots of old problems to work on, but stuff that we don't understand, that's actually exciting for the vast majority of scientists I know.
Yeah, and it may not be correct.
Exactly, yeah.
So I remember when they discovered the first quasars, when they discovered the first pulsars, and, same thing happened. People made all kinds of, really exciting but rather speculative claims. Yeah. People are saying, oh, there's only a few of these pulsars. There's not going to be very many.
Right.
And, Maybe we'll discover 12 quasars, but that'll be it.
Right.
And today we got over 1 million of them. So
That we know of, yeah.
that we know of. Yeah, there's more than that. So once again, I think it's important that we caution lay people. James Webb's amazing. It's going to give us the answers that we're looking for about the early universe, but we're naive if we think we're going to get it all in 1 or 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, well, just even from an observational standpoint with the Hubble, it took a while to figure out how to calibrate it and get all the data as good as we can. And so we're kind of used to that with Hubble. Webb's still in that kind of figuring out how to use it phase, even with all the remarkable results
It's not even been giving us data for 2 years yet.
I know, yeah.
So but I'm amazed at how much we've gotten in just the 18 months. So
and it's incredible images. I mean, I realize they're not optical images, but man, they're fascinating.
Well, there's kind of an apologetic point there. Look how beautiful these images are.
Yeah.
I mean, just like when Hubble came out with his first images, people were astounded by the elegance and beauty. We're getting the same response from James Webb. What does this tell us about the Creator? So,
you know what's funny though? I mean, with the Hubble, there was that's cool. There's almost a ghostly there's just something about the Webb that is so different from how we see. It's incredibly beautiful, but it's beautiful in an eerie way at the same time. It's just different than the Hubble one.
it is, and just yesterday I posted images of Cassiopeia A, the most recent supernova, and showed people, okay, this is what James Webb revealed to us at near-infrared wavelengths, and this is what it revealed at mid-infrared wavelengths. The two images show radically different.
Right.
It's like, so the James Webb, just by selecting different parts of the infrared spectrum, can give us some really amazing insights.
It is,
and then you compare it with the visible, you compare it with the X-ray and the gamma ray. We live in an amazing time.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, thank you for joining us today in Stars, Cells, and God. Join the discussion in the comments below. Remember to like this video and to subscribe at our YouTube channel, at Reasons to Believe YouTube channel for more content. New episodes of Stars, Cells, and God release each Wednesday and are available here on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. Be sure to share this video with a friend, and remember, the more we learn about science, the more reasons we have to believe in Jesus Christ as Creator, Lord, and Savior.